and again, tell me if it's not true, but you sound like a little bit like a contrarian in the sense that you seem to be excited by sort of controversial stories and breaking them. So that sounds like an excellent move in that sense. But I was also thinking about why I am excited that you're going to do this, because what I think you might bring is still that journalistic rigor because there is also a very big part of independent media. There is a lot of independent media, I think. And for example, one reason for me to get into YouTube is also the other side. And that is like, oh my God, the stories on YouTube are wild. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, you mentioned you shouldn't be branded a conspiracy theorist too easily, and I totally agree. But then again, there is a sea of conspiracy theories out there. And so maybe what you can bring, or what I'm hoping to get from the blind spot is like, the controversial stories, but with the journalistic rigor.
100%. I totally agree. And that's why I'm very keen to stress that my vision for the blind spot is also about credit and value-centered journalism. And it's about
what is
being
value-centered journalism?
Sorry. Yes, it's just a concept I've created. But the idea is that in independent journalism, you have to be value-led and you have to live transparently by those values. I think there are two parts of value-driven journalism. The legacy is obviously the different newspapers and media offerings, which are value-centered as far as the customers are concerned. But the reality is that the masthead values are often not shared by the employees because the nature of journalism is so competitive that the recruitment side of it, you're not necessarily hiring individuals who are aligned with the values of the paper. You're hiring people who want to get a job in journalism, and they might mask their true political values, or they might mask that they won't necessarily be adherents of the masthead. So you will get a lot of people getting jobs at the Wall Street Journal who maybe don't really want to be capitalists or whatever. I don't know, or at the Guardian who was different way inclined. So there's a mismatch between the writers and the masthead values. And that never used to be a problem in the old days because there was a very strong hierarchy, and I think there was a norm that ensured that the values of the paper had to be fundamentally aligned with no matter what. But I think in recent years that has changed due to the power of networks and the power of community organization within journalistic and other corporate structures, where people are aligning according to their real values and trying to kind of change the values of the paper from the inside. And that is one of the phenomena that I think is bad for readers, because readers are still buying the FT or the Wall Street Journal for what they perceive the open, transparent values to be. Mm-hmm. They're not necessarily buying it to be campaigned, in a different way or for a different agenda to be thrown at them, right?
Do you mean then that the political narratives or political camps are sort of taking over these media outlets? Like how, I don't know, perhaps a left-wing group might take over The Guardian, and a right-wing group, might take over, I don't know, like Fox News or so. Well, even if I don't know if they had to take it over, but is that what you mean?
Yeah. So basically, I think there is the new generation of younger reporters, I don't think are happy to settle for the values of the organization they join. They want to change them. They're like women who want to change men when they marry them. And that's what I say. They marry them for X, and they're like, no, well, don't worry, I'll work on him. And by the time I'm finished with him, he'll be exactly how I intend him to be. So I feel that's kind of what's going on. And to that degree, I don't think that's very transparent with readers. And I think you have to be honest with who you are and what you are. Now, so, within a liberal newspaper, that's fine. Yeah. If I think the FT, historically is a pro-business, pro-finance paper that is going to entertain all sorts of different perspectives, because markets don't discriminate, and you need to see the big picture. You need to understand all perspectives to get the clearing price of any product, right? Or any share price or any asset. So that's why when when people kind of freeze out different opinions, I don't think that's good for markets. So in the blind spot, I want to be very transparent about my own biases so people know. I don't think bias is a problem. I think actually it's impossible in the modern media system to not have a bias. You just have to be transparent about your bias and also transparent about how you want to correct for your bias, maybe.
So what are your biases then, Izabella?
My biases are that, I mean, the obvious one is that who I am, which is that I'm a West London, Polish heritage, English woman who is in her 40s. That's obviously going to give me one perspective. But politically, I see myself as like the archetypal flip-flopper who is the sort of person who's always going to be waiting to be convinced by a narrative. So I try to not make assumptions, and I tend to counterbalance things. So in my broad political history, I've dabbled with all sorts of perspectives. So I find myself quite hard to pigeonhole in some ways. But I can tell you that right now, I feel, I tend to go through phases in my writing. So I had a tech utopian phase, then I had a very cynical phase. Now I'm in a sort of trying to push back against some of the consensus that is out there. And I think it's very important to push forward with free speech. I'm not a free speech maximalist because I do actually believe there are important constraints on speech, but I think it's gone too far in one way. And so, but at the same time, as you were saying, value-centered journalism is also about rigor and making sure that it's not just about, you mustn't ignore things and then therefore you consume all this crap that's on the internet. It's about being able to differentiate, but it's also about not being scared to look at certain things from that sort of banned area and think, well, actually, this thing that's there, that's actually truthful. Like, we can pluck that because they've got a point on that. You can't. So it's about being able to differentiate and to not, a lot of the disinfo that's out there, and my view generally on disinfo is that it's everywhere. I don't think it's of the left or of the right only. I think the entire system has become consumed by disinfo, not just because of the political disinfo and the state-sponsored disinfo, but because of the corporate practices out there to bury bad news, to talk just the corporate and PR spin alone has polluted the information space as well. So as a journalist on the front line, you are continuously, you have to be on guard because you are continuously being bombarded with spin one way or the other. So yeah, that's my general perspective about value-centered journalism, is that you have to do your homework and you have to be transparent when you don't know something, and you have to be transparent about when you speculate about things, amongst other things. And as long as you're transparent about it, I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think that I broadly agree with a lot of that. Like, for example, being on YouTube and publishing my own stories, I do take sides sometimes, or I do put my own spin on a story. But one of my core values is to always publish all the sources in link, in text, so that people really can make up their mind about my biases, for example. And what I also try to do in the more controversial videos is feature the best counterpoints to my points, because I think this is really important, and it's lacking a little bit